Hi everyone, I'm Jane, and today we're going to paint this misty mountain landscape. Make sure you check out my website at paintingwithjane.com and then click on 30 Days of Art for the PDF lesson for this, as well as reference images and a lot more. Also check out the video description below for a full list of materials, and let's get started. All right, so here I have everything that I'm going to end up using today. I've got my little 5x7 canvas, my plate, my matte medium, got my 1/2" brush that I'm only going to use once just for the underpainting, and then my detail brushes for the rest of it. And I just have a number 8 bright, a number 8 filbert, and my number 6 round. I have 2 jars of water. One is to wash, one is to rinse. Remember that I am not using water on my paints this month. Instead of using water, I'm just using matte medium. You can still use water if that's what you prefer. And then I've got my heavy body paints laid out in the order that I chose for the month. So I will always keep them set up in this order, so I always know exactly where the color that I want is, which one is my warmer color, which one is my cooler color. Right now I found this image on Pixabay, and there's a link in the video description below to where you can download it for free as well. Now when I'm looking for an image to do on these little 5x7 canvases where I want to work really fast and really loose, what I'm looking for are images that have simple and interesting shapes. So we have very simple shapes in the mountains here, but they're really interesting in their relation to each other, where they focus your viewpoint and everything else. The colors are very simple. When you first look at this image, it almost seems monochromatic, but if you look really close, in the hillsides, particularly the dark ones on the side here, you've got a little bit of a super dark, kind of muted green. And that was really interesting to me. I like the challenge of taking an image that is pretty much black and white and incorporating a little bit of color into it. Those are a couple reasons I chose this image. Now, the first thing I want to do is decide if I need an underpainting. And when I look at this image, particularly in the sky and the water, I feel like there's a gray tone that's kind of balancing everything together. So that's what I'm going to do, I think, is I'm going to give this canvas just a gray wash, and then we can start sketching everything else out. Now this is a 5x7 canvas board. It's not, I haven't gessoed it or anything. It comes pre-gessoed. So I'm going to put out some Mars Black, some titanium white, and my matte medium. So I'm just making sure that my 1/2" flat is as dry as possible. And I'm going to come into my paint and mix up kind of a light mid-tone gray. So it's a little lighter than a medium gray. And it doesn't have to be real precise. I'm going to get some matte medium, which is going to help thin the paint down and help it spread just like water would. But it's not underbinding my paint. And I'm just going to loosely cover this whole background. So just like water, if I'm having some issues getting down into the texture of the canvas, I can just grab some more matte medium. See how transparent that makes it? I don't want to use too solid of a color back here, because then it might be hard to cover later. And really, this color is just here to kind of set the stage for everything else. Now, all I'm worried about is just covering all of the spots on the canvas. See, I'm doing it super fast and super loose, because that's the name of the game this month. There we go. All right, now I'm going to take my number 6 round brush, and this is still wet, and that's okay. And I'm going to make up a color that is almost black with just a hint of white in it. I just don't want it to be pure black, but very, very dark. Some matte medium. I'm going to thin it down a bit, and we're going to start sketching out our hills. But first, I'm going to decide where this bottom area is, where the little outcrop in the middle of the river is, and I feel like the bottom of it is right about here. See, I'm just kind of sketching it. None of this matters right now. Even if I accidentally do one of those things and decide I don't like that later, that doesn't matter, so don't stress things. So that's about where the bottom of it meets the water, and then it kind of comes up a bit into here. I want you to work really fast here. Think of this as almost like a study that you're getting ready to paint this on a larger canvas, but first you want to work out your technique. So my large hill kind of comes down like this. It's a pretty dramatic slope and about meets up with that. Our other hill, let's say it starts right about here, kind of comes down a bit, and it ends behind this outcrop. There's a little bit of our river right here that kind of goes around it. And it comes down and pretty much straight across. Now over here, notice I didn't make the bottom of this mountain because you can't really see it in our images, it's just dark there. So I'm gonna stick with that. So basically, we're just starting with our darkest values. I just wanted to find what was the darkest and block that in first. And I'm just kind of filling it in with a dark color. Anything that I look at in my image that is dark, I'm just giving it a dark color, even though when we look at it, we can see variations in that color. I'm not worrying about that right now. I'm just blocking it in. Get our little outcrop blocked in, and our large hill. So I'm not trying not to go into the sky. I'm not trying to keep this neat and tidy. I'm just getting it on there. My color might be a little different every time, and that's all right. Now down here, this piece of land ends somewhere, but we don't know where. All we see is the dark in the water, so that's what we're gonna do. We're just gonna lay in where we think that dark, the shadow or reflection of the mountain in the water is. And we have a little bit of that going on over here. A little bit below this outcrop. And I think that's good. All right, the next thing we're gonna do is start laying in our distant hills. Now these, again, if you look at them, they're just a sequence of slightly grayer hills. As they move back in the distance, the fog and the atmospheric perspective are graying them out and making them almost transparent. So I'm just gonna grab a little more white into that mixture. I still wanna keep it a little on the dark side. Some matte medium. And first I'm gonna do this hill that's in the center here because it is one of the darker ones in the background. So we're just gonna kind of bring it up and end it there and fill it in. Now when I'm going near the edges of these foreground hills, I am gonna put my hand down and just put a little bit more attention into that part. Make sure that I have as crisp of a line as possible. Since these are closer to us, there would be a crisp line right here where it overlaps this more distant piece. But as they all get more distant, the lines between them will get fuzzed a little bit more. Let's take that same color and we'll do our second hill over here. It starts just a little lower and it comes down about like that. And then we'll just make sure that we get a pretty crisp edge here on this front mountain. Let's go lighter again. Maybe not quite that light. Let's hold it up and test it against the mountain we just did. And that looks a good amount lighter. It's not dramatically lighter, but it's not so similar that it's gonna get lost in there. And we'll add in another hill here. As I bring it toward this hill that I just did, I'm going to use light pressure and slightly overlap it. I'm not really blending. It's just applying a thinner layer of it right there, so that they almost look hazed out. Let's get some more white, almost pure white this time. Not quite pure white, but pretty close. And we're gonna do one more little distant hill right about in here. Again, I'm gonna haze it out on this one that I just laid down. Fill it in, but I'm not gonna haze it out too much around this darker hill, because again, this is closer to us, so there might be a little more definition between it and this one. Maybe we'll even just ever so slightly, I'm barely touching the canvas. I'm just breaking that up a little bit more and taking some of this white down into this valley a bit more. To make it seem like maybe there's some fog rolling through that valley coming toward us. And this piece may end up getting lost in our sky, and that's okay, I'm not worried about that. Let's start taking some of those lighter values into our water here. So I'm gonna get some white. I still have some gray on my brush. I'm just gonna kind of load up, and now I'm just gonna touch into my matte medium. I didn't mix it, I just touched into it. And what we're gonna do is I'm gonna take my brush, I'm just gonna kind of lay it flat, like that, against my canvas. And rather than streaking side to side, which is gonna give me like stripes, I've discovered, I've got the matte medium down, that I really like to do it like this and just kind of drag. Don't get too crazy with trying to get this part perfect. It's all about layers. And that dark that I'm working on top of is dry, so I'm just kind of covering it. Make sure we get our bright spot of our little river that continues over there. And break up a line here, but I don't want to take it too much farther into this area. We can even come back and get a little bit more black and a little bit more matte medium. See with the black there, you can tell how much matte medium I picked up. And we're going to do the same thing starting over here. Just kind of streak it. I think you get a little bit more of a natural kind of rippled effect when you use your brush sideways like that. Matte medium and black paint down, start in the corner, just drag to the side. You can always get a little bit more matte medium. Okay, I think that's a good start for our water. We're gonna come back and add more to it. I'm gonna go to my filbert, and again, it's dry. I'm gonna load up with matte medium quite a bit, and some white, and I may end up picking up a tiny bit of gray there, and that's okay. I'm trying to mix up a fairly thin white. I'm just gonna start laying it in the sky here. It's gonna be a little transparent. We're gonna see some of that gray through it, and that's okay because this is not gonna be our final layer of the sky. When I get to these dark foreground mountains, again, I'm gonna take just a little bit more care to give them nice crisp edges. And see how I kind of added a little bit of a character to it that wasn't there a minute ago. As I get to these a little bit more distant ones, I'm lightening my pressure and kind of overlapping them just a little bit. See how it starts to mist it out a little? So heavier pressure there and lighter pressure slightly overlapping the distant hills. Don't worry about seeing your brush strokes in the sky at this point. And yeah, that little hill's kind of getting lost in the sky, but I'm not worried about that, that's okay. This little hill, even though it's a darker one, I am gonna mist it out just a little bit. All right, I think that's good for our sky for now. So this has dried a little bit, the river. So I'm gonna go back to my round brush, a little bit of matte medium. I'm not gonna pick up a ton of paint this time, just a little bit of white, and it's pretty thin down with matte medium. Let's go up into here and just kind of add a little bit of brightness into this distant area. I know it looks like it's poking up into the sky right now or up into the trees, but it won't. A little more matte medium, flat, super light pressure. Just kind of drag it across. Let some of those spots be bright white. All right, now while our water and our sky dries, let's go ahead and start adding in some of that green into these foreground hills. Now, my favorite way to make a nice, deep, kind of muted green is to mix Mars Black with the cadmium yellow light. So that's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna put some of this out. If you've never used black and yellow to make green before, you might be just about to discover your favorite green. And you just can't buy a green like this in a tube, so you gotta make it yourself. All right, my filbert, I dried it off really good on my paper towel. I'm gonna come in here and I'm gonna take my black to my yellow. If I take my yellow to my black, I'm likely to lose the yellow completely because the black is so much stronger. You know, I'm gonna use quite a bit of this. I'm gonna pick up a good amount of black. And over here, I'm just gonna pull enough yellow into it until I start to see a green color. And that might just look black to you on the camera. A little bit of matte medium. Now when I start adding this color, I'm gonna do it really loosely. So I'm not trying to draw trees. I'm not even trying to keep it on the mountain. Just kind of dotting and streaking. And as you can see, there's quite a bit of difference between the color that I already put on the mountain and this color. And that can be kind of stressful. You can, you know, maybe kind of freak out a little bit thinking, oh, that looks terrible. How am I gonna cover that? Maybe I should blend it. Maybe I should paint the whole mountain this color, but don't worry about it. Just lay down that dark color. Don't worry about the water right now. Just get it down to about where you think the bottom of this hill is. And in here, again, I'm going to take this one down about to the bottom of where this little outcrop meets the water. You can turn your filbert on its edge and touch, particularly at the top edge of something. It might make it look like there's a little tree poking up there. And we'll do the same thing over here. See, I'm not filling in the entire shape. Because this black and white mixture, Mars Black is a very cool black, remember? And so the black and white mixture is really gonna make this green pop because the green is much warmer than the black and white that we have there. Let's press that little piece of river down flat. This little piece in here, and how we're gonna do that is we're gonna come over the edge of it just a little bit, and then right here I'm gonna drag just a hint of that out. See, just kind of scribbling it on there. Nothing fancy. Let's pull some more yellow in there. Now every time I go for a lighter green, I'm gonna apply a little bit less of it than I did before. Now I'm kind of deviating from my reference photo, and that's okay because I like where this is going. So I think if I add too much of this color around the edge here, it's gonna throw off my light source a little bit. I feel like the sun is back here and it's starting to maybe get a little low. So to me, I feel like the light would be hitting right around these edges here. And that's pretty much where I'm going to concentrate this brighter color. So I'm using lighter pressure. Actually, you know what? I don't want to do that just yet. The reason I didn't want to do that just yet is because this lighter color that I started applying is about the same value as the base of the mountains that I added. And I feel like that's kind of making it look almost see-through. So let's do something else real quick. And then we'll come back to that. I'm going to get a little bit of matte medium. I'm just really going to tone that area with some matte medium and some black. So wherever I can see that base color of the mountain, I'm just going to streak through it with some black. I'm not being specific. If I end up covering up some of that green that I did, that's okay. So what I don't want you to do here, because remember we're painting loose, I don't want you to say, well, I have a little tiny spot right there, and try and get in here and do it exact so you're not covering any green. If you have a little tiny spot right there, just go like that and cover it up. Whatever is showing from that base color of the mountain, just a little bit of black, kind of cover it up. And maybe let's go ahead and streak that into the water a bit here. There, I feel like that's pulling it all together a little bit more. Now when we go back and we add our lighter green, I don't feel like it will look so weird. And the reason I didn't paint the hill black in the first place, I know some of you might be confused and say, well, can I just paint the hill black to begin with? I think that green probably wouldn't show up quite as well. That, and you know, it's not always a light color just layered on top of a darker color. Sometimes the dark color comes back and layers back on top of that light color. And again, it's about layers. The more you layer, even, you know, going back and forth from dark to light, I think the more integrated everything looks with each other. And I know my water is looking terrible right now. Hopefully I can pull that back out. All right, let's go back to our yellow and get that little bit of a lighter green. Now we can start adding that. I'm using really light pressure, and I'm really only using like this part of my brush, kind of flat. I'm just kind of, like if it had a corner, I would really just be using that corner. And I have quite a bit of paint on here, but I'm not depositing very much because I'm using such light pressure. Each brush stroke kind of moves in a different direction, but they're all pretty much either pointing diagonally this way or almost horizontally this way. I don't really want any pointing this way because I feel like that's going to throw off the look of my mountain. And I like that that black that I just added is still a little bit wet because it's almost picking up a bit in this green and helping to blend them so there's not a hard transition between the brighter green and the black. I think I'm kind of liking that. Take some of that up here. Just keep dashing it around. Leave some of that black showing, because that's going to help it seem like maybe there's either rocks there or just a deeper, darker part of the foliage that's on this mountain. I think I'm even going to take a hint from this area right here where I have this little outcrop. Maybe I'll take a little bit of this lighter color kind of up right there too. And let's go lighter. More yellow. Thin it down again. And just like before, I'm going to do a little bit less of this, concentrating it mostly to the edges here. Barely touching. Now don't worry if you get too much, or if you end up with a line, or, you know, just put it on there, don't stop. You know, if you feel like you messed up with this yellow color, don't stop, just keep going. So if I went, I'm just gonna say, it's fine, and leave it. Especially when we're kind of working quick like this, and those colors that we're painting on top of are still pretty wet. So if I go try and wipe that away now, I'm gonna wipe up and smear the other colors, and I don't wanna do that. Sometimes I apply this quite heavy, sometimes much thinner. All right, let's tidy up some of this. Some of it I feel like got away from me a little bit. Actually, that's a little too dark in there. We'll just mix up a bit more black in there. Especially for that back area where I went. We'll just do the exact same brush stroke. I'm not trying to blend it. Just taking that same brush stroke over top of it. Any of these that I feel like are a little too strong. See, I didn't completely obliterate that piece. I just very lightly dusted over it. And same here, because I almost feel like I'm starting to get a line down this edge where that light color is. So I'm just gonna break up that line, see? And you can go back and forth with these layers as much as you want to. Adding, taking away. There's never a point at which you have to stop. You stop when you want to stop. You stop when you look at it and you say, yep, that is what I want to see. I'm going to take just a tiny bit of a much brighter green. Just a tiny bit. I'm wiping a lot of that off. And right in some of these most forward areas, just the tiny hint of this color. And anything gets too crazy, like right there, and it's gone. Let's get some matte medium. I'm gonna just streak some of that over our water a bit. Just right there at the base of it. See how that looks. If I don't like it, I can take it away. It's another fun thing about painting like this. Free yourself up to experiment. If I decide I hate that green reflection, I can take it away, so I'm not worried about it. I'm gonna go back to my water, so I'm just drying off my number 6 round. Don't twist it if you're drying it off. You know, don't get a paper towel and like bend the bristles. Just push it up to a paper towel and kind of press the bristles down, and that dries it pretty good. I'm gonna work on my water again real quick. A little bit of black, a little hint of white, not a ton of paint, and some matte medium. And let's just lightly start streaking that at the base here as well. Some white, maybe not that much. Light pressure, barely touching. See, I've got white on one side, black on the other. I'm gonna turn it over to the black side. Don't work the paint too much because it'll blend rather than smear, and then you'll just have a big gray spot. A little matte medium. I'm gonna get rid of this one white spot that I don't like. Now I've been standing pretty close to this the whole time I've been painting it. So I'm gonna prop it up and I'm gonna walk away so that I can see exactly what this looks like, see if I need to make any adjustments before I move on to the sky. Okay, so when I look at it from a bit more of a distance, the little river piece that's going around the center outcrop still kind of seems to be going up a little bit to me, but I kind of like it. It almost looks like it's flowing down a hill. So I don't think I'm gonna mess with it too much. One of the other things that I see is I have a bit of a disconnect right here between where the river meets this part of the river. So I'm just gonna bring a bit more of a light color down into here. My water, I feel like, is pretty good. I would like to see a little bit of some extra white in there, almost pure white, not a lot, just some little specks, but I don't want to smear that water anymore. So I'm gonna let that dry completely, and then we'll come back and add just the tiniest little hint of some pure white in there. My green hills, I feel like they're pretty good, but I would almost like to see just a tiny hint more of that bright green, particularly in the lower areas, the ones that are getting a little bit closer to the water. Other than that, I think I'm pretty happy with those. And then we just need to finish our sky. So I'm gonna give this about 10 minutes to dry, but what that's also gonna do is give me about 10 minutes away from it so that I can kind of reset a little bit. And then when I come back to it, I'll have a bit of a better perception of it with some fresh eyes. All right, another thing that I noticed when I was standing back looking at it is these are really flat looking. They're very solid colored, and I don't want that. So I'm just gonna take a tiny bit of paint, a little bit of each color, and some matte medium. This is very thin. I'm just gonna kind of streak it through here lightly. Didn't really matter if it was darker or lighter than what I had, just different. Let's do a little bit of that in here too. But anytime if you feel your brush strokes getting too tight, like I did in here, just put a little more pressure on your brush and tell yourself, I don't care, just do it. Just do it. Just scrubbing it on there. Let's go just a tiny speck lighter. Just scrub it on there, just do it. And that's a little lighter than I want, but that's okay. Like I said, this is all about experimenting, figuring out what happens when you do something. That hill didn't turn out too bad. Let's just scrub a little bit of that white out here. And if it's still too light, I can go just a hint darker. But now those two mountains have a little bit more texture into them, a little bit more life. Let's do the same thing with this back one. Just a slightly different color than what's there, thinned out with some matte medium. And just scrub it in. Again, keeping a little bit of a softer line between the two hills. I think that's much better. Let's do our sky. A little bit more matte medium. And a heavy amount of white this time. I'm just using a tiny bit of matte medium to help it flow better, not to thin it out. And we'll start just laying it in up here. Thicker than before. And as I get closer to at least my foreground mountains, I'm going to lighten my pressure a bit and get pretty close to those edges. It's okay if it overlaps a little bit, but notice I'm still not trying to like cut in directly around it. Still working very loose. With these more distant ones, I'm lightening my pressure again and just dusting over them. And if the top of them is completely obliterated, it's just going to look like it's faded into the mountain or faded into the sky. No hard lines there. This looks like a nice foggy day. I'm probably the only person in the world who loves a foggy day. But again, I'm still not too stressed out about my brush stroke showing in the white because it just helps indicate a little bit of texture. Maybe you can see a bit of some clouds. And again, super light pressure here to just kind of obscure the top of that mountain. Just a little bit. Again, drying off my number 6 round. We're gonna take care of the water and then I feel like we're done. Just a pinpoint of matte medium and a pinpoint of white. Pure white. And let's kind of just dash a bit into there where the water comes and meets the little lake. And remember I said I wanted a bit more of that bright white, so I'm going to get just a little bit of white, a little bit of matte medium. And since this is dry now, it won't streak in there or blend. And I'm just lightly, barely touching, just dragging it across. Getting a few spots that are bright, bright white. It might look like some little spray, maybe it's breaking over some rocks on the bottom of the river. But I keep that matte medium in there because that helps prevent it from showing the texture of the canvas. And I said I did want to add just a couple little specks of some brighter green, so I just mixed the tiniest hint of black in with quite a bit of yellow. And this brush is pretty dry. I didn't use any matte medium. So I'm just gonna come into a few of these spots and just very lightly dash in some of this brighter color. Again, stay really loose. I'm not polka dotting. I'm almost like, almost scribbling. So I'm just using the very tip of the brush and just kind of squidging it around a little bit. Mr. Moon says hi. So just remember, whenever you go lighter, reduce the amount of color that you're using. And never forget to sign it. So even though this would technically be a study, I'm still gonna sign it. I'm gonna keep it. I'm gonna write on the back what day it is, what number of painting it is for the month. And I'm gonna keep this little study, and maybe someday it'll turn into a full-size painting. And there's your Misty Mountain landscape, and our first painting in our first 30 Days of Art challenge. Now, I don't mind telling you that there were a couple of moments where I was a little bit nervous. Remember that the vast majority of the paintings that I'll be doing this September are paintings just right off the top of my head. I'll find an image and just start going with it, and so you get to see that process. So I feel like there were a few times in the water where I was a little nervous that I wasn't gonna be able to bring it back. Overall, I'm really happy with it. I think that I did overwork the paint just a little bit in the water. I think that I could have had just a little bit more definition between some of the black and white areas. If I were to do this again, I think I would also bring a very small amount of some super, super thin green, just barely into the water here to indicate a little bit more of a reflection. I have some there, but I'd like to see a little bit more of that. I know I deviated from my reference image quite a bit, in particular with the green on the hillside, but once I started adding that green, I just had to keep it going and pop it a lot more than was in the image. I felt like in the image it worked with the green being quite muted, but in my painting I really wanted to see quite a bit of that green. I love the way black and yellow makes this green that's desaturated yet can still be quite bright, and so I really wanted to run with that. If you try this painting or a painting on your own using some of the techniques that we discussed today, I would love to see what you do. Make sure that you find me on Facebook or Instagram. Just search for Painting with Jane and you'll find me. I'd love to hear what you think about the direction we're taking our painting this month. So leave me a comment below and let me know. Thank you as always for painting with me, everyone, and I'll see you next time.